All right, today we're going to be talking about how to organize an argument. When we write an essay or when we give a speech, specifically when it comes to argumentation, there's a way that we need to organize. And we're going to kind of go through these notes here, and you have a set of notes that you can complete as we go through these requirements. I'm going to talk about these things as you're filling them in. But first, we're going to watch a small video clip. Notice how I'm using Prezi here. This is something you can do for your final project. Prezi is very easy to use and it's very easy to embed videos. So I'm going to show you a video that relates to organizing an argument and why it's so important to do so.
Research indicates that the brawling gene may be innate in humans. Meet cousins William and Wesley.
If only all the fights could be this adorable. Why does that toddler want a Mustang in the first place? He's way too young to be having a midlife crisis.
What is this? Yeah, I'll give you rosy cheeks. That's your punishment.
This is my favorite trash talk I've ever heard.
Remember what happened last time?
I'll punch you in the nose.
I'll rough you up.
My question is, where are the parents?
Well, William just loves his toys. He can't get enough of them, but he also loves sharing. See that? Isn't that cute?
Okay, if your kids are fighting, you know what you do? Film it. And then sell it to a TV show.
And then one of these kids came back with a bat. And it really wasn't so cute then.
Okay, so we can see that the argument in that little clip got kind of out of hand. Now, if these little guys had maybe used some more organization when it came to their argument, they may have been more effective at convincing one or the other to give back the Mustang toy, which leads us to our next point, which is why is organization so important? When it comes to doing well in this presentation, I'm going to tell you now, if you throw it together on Monday night or Tuesday night before your presentation is due, it's not going to go well. You do have to practice your speech. You do have to think about what you're going to put where and why. If you just throw this all together at last minute, it's going to really weaken your argument. And when it comes to argumentation and having a strong argument, there is a pattern that people tend to follow. When it comes to making a point about what you have to say, you do have to support what you're claiming with evidence. This isn't an opinion piece, so it's not just, I think the appropriate balance is, and here's why. You actually have to provide evidence to support and back up your claims. We also aren't allowed to hit or yell at each other, so we can't use the method that we saw in that clip. Now, when it comes to your thesis or your position, you want to make sure that as your audience, we really understand what exactly it is you're taking a side for. When I was reading through your paragraphs, I noticed some people said things like, well, the appropriate balance is really hard to define. And they went off to discuss why it was hard to define. That's not the point. The point of this is to establish what your point is. Say, this is what we believe the appropriate balance is, and you're going to define it, and that's going to be from the very beginning what you're going to say. You can decide how you're going to say that, but it needs to be really clear, and as your audience, we shouldn't have any questions about what position you're taking or how you're taking it. So after you have figured out your position and you've already at this point you've already collected all your evidence, you need to figure out how am I going to make all of this work together. You need to have transitions in your presentation. In other words, think of transitions like the tortilla. If this presentation was a burrito, all the fillings inside, the beans, the meat, the hot sauce, whatever, that's all like our evidence to support our claim, but the tortilla is what wraps everything together, and it's a logical progression, meaning that we are working from a point that makes sense. as I had mentioned yesterday or previously, if you're making a claim about what the appropriate balance is, you can't say, I think this is the appropriate balance because I like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. That doesn't make sense. And just the same way, you don't want to just start off rattling off evidence. You need to have everything transition from one point to another. You don't want to start with a conclusion. You want to start with your intro. You want to pull your audience in, because if you don't pull us in and in your intro, you're going to lose our attention for the entire presentation. And I've given you some words that you can use to help you transition as you're speaking. You can use words like on the other hand, according to, furthermore, although. These are all examples of transitions that you can use to show that you're moving on to another point, or you're elaborating more on the same point that you just spoke about, or that you're even discussing the counter argument. And that would be a transition like on the other hand, or in fact, although. Those are all words that you could use especially for that counter argument. Also, as your group is presenting, you will want to present one idea at a time. If you start trying to lay out all of your claims to support your position right from the beginning, not only are we going to forget those, but we're going to forget exactly what you're trying to prove if you don't go back to your main points repeatedly. Since it is a speech, you do want to kind of reiterate your point, and we noticed that in Obama's speech, he kept talking about how he was the president and he wanted to make sure his citizens were safe, and he wanted to make sure that the Constitution was protected. And he kept kind of going back to that in his speech. Same with you. You want to make sure that you kind of restate your ideas one at a time, and you talk about each idea one at a time, and it's easy for us to understand what your point is. You don't want to spend a lot of time just talking about something random. And when you are explaining your ideas, they need to always connect back to the thesis. So you need to think about, what is our position, and how does what I'm talking about right now relate back to that position? How does that prove my position, prove my argument? Which brings us to the next point, which is using evidence. If you are not using evidence in this presentation, you're not going to pass, because actually the whole point of an evidence-based argument is to use evidence. I noticed that in some of the paragraphs that you turned in, some people turn in arguments with no evidence. There were places where you kind of talked, where some students talked about what they read in certain articles, but I didn't know where that evidence was from. It wasn't in quotation marks. So I didn't know if the person was paraphrasing. I didn't know who said what. So you need to make sure that in your speech you do give evidence. You need to state where that's from. It needs to be current and scholarly, meaning that it's not Wikipedia. I know that some of you had arguments yesterday for why Wikipedia is a valid source, and I agree that Wikipedia can be a great place to start. And in fact, there are a lot of resources on Wikipedia that you can use to help you find a scholarly or a current, up-to-date source. However, Wikipedia itself typically is not really opinion, or it's opinion based. It's not necessarily fact based. But what you can do is on Wikipedia is you can scroll to the bottom of the Wikipedia page, and you're going to see a whole bunch of links to specific articles, to sources that you can use. You do need to make sure that they are unbiased, that they do actually fit the scholarly criteria, and you need to make sure that it's something that you can cite as well. And you can use Wikipedia to help dive into certain aspects of your topic, but please make sure you don't use Wikipedia. Also, video counts. I know that some of you have really panicked about the idea of a 10-minute presentation, but if you think back to the instructions for the assignment, I did say that you can use up to a 4-minute video. I'm asking the video to be 4 minutes because what I've had happen in the past is someone will put on a 10-minute video and 2 slides, and their point didn't really get across to the audience. It doesn't make sense, and that's not fair to other groups who have worked hard to make sure that they meet those requirements. So please make sure that video is not longer than 4 minutes. You can use clips from the videos that we've seen in class. I have listed the websites for the clips that we've watched. They're all on Blackboard. And you do need to cite a video. So if you do use a video in your presentation, I should see that in your works cited. You also need to make sure your evidence is explained. You can't just say the appropriate balance is for less privacy and security and then have a quote from President Obama and move on to the next point. You actually need to explain to us, how does what you're showing us, how does this evidence actually prove your point? If, as your audience, we have questions, you haven't done a thorough enough job explaining. And I noticed that on many of the paragraphs that I was grading, many people barely touched on explanation. They would write one sentence of explanation, and as your reader, I still had questions like, I don't understand how this relates to the main point, or I don't understand how this reveals what you're trying to prove. So you need to make sure that there are no questions after you explain how that piece of evidence reveals your main point. As I mentioned yesterday, I was going to talk to you about the counter argument. It's really important to address the opposing viewpoint in your presentation. It's important because you need to show that you have actually researched what the opposing viewpoint is. You haven't just looked at your own viewpoint, and you can think about what the audience is thinking as you're giving your presentation. And when it comes to addressing the counter argument, it also makes your presentation less biased, meaning that you are saying, hey, I know that other people have different views, but here is why those views have issues. And it's not necessarily us proving somebody wrong. You're not trying to argue with somebody. More of what you're doing is looking at the other person's logic, looking at their explanations, looking at what they have to say about the issue, and then finding flaws in what they've said to then prove your own point. If someone is misinformed, if someone makes a claim about why something should be one way or another, you can also see if they have misinformation, meaning they have the wrong information, and you can explain how you have the correct information and present that as the correct information. If you don't have a counter argument, your argument is weak. And again, you need to back up your claims about the counter argument with evidence. Finally, when we are wrapping up our presentation, this is not the time for you to say in conclusion, or so that's it, that's what we think, or that was my presentation, because guess what? We all just watched it. We know you're at the end. We know that you gave the presentation, and we know that that's it because it's the end of your presentation. What you need to give us as your audience is some sort of new information relating to, I guess in a way, what we should do about this or how we can inform our own thinking. You want to review your main points as well. And I want to address some issues where I might have caused confusion here. Where it says avoid new information, what I mean by new information is like a new claim. You don't want to introduce anything brand new in your conclusion. You want to, when I said new information, I meant like addressing a call to action. You can leave us with a question, or you can leave us with something to think about to help us understand your view, and any final thoughts that you might have about this topic, about what is the appropriate balance between a government's responsibility to protect its citizens and a citizen's right to privacy. You can leave us with a thought, something to think about and consider in our own lives. And that is much more effective than any of these things that I've listed up here. I noticed as I read some of your paragraphs, some people did write in conclusion, or so that was my paragraph, or that's why I believe what I do. Again, you never want to end an essay or a speech or anything with that, because since we're at the end, we know it's the end. So what I'd like you to do at this point is make sure that you have all the missing spaces filled in. You can work with your row partner on that. And I'm going to give us a few minutes for questions to make sure we are all on the same page. Good luck.